Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real, where by now you know we talk about things that matter with people who matter. And today, my guest is a new friend to me. Scott Allan is the author of multiple best-selling books, including Do the Hard Things First, Undefeated, and Empower Your Thoughts. Scott is a former corporate business trainer in Japan for over 20 years, and he still lives there today. He's invested over 10,000 hours of practice and research in confidence development, cognitive behavioral therapy, and mindset optimization. You're talking my language, Scott. This is exactly what I've been doing for, I guess, 20 years in my own business. So welcome.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Isn't it cool how technology lets us be like 11 hours different in time? And here we are recording this live.
For sure. Yeah. No, I love it.
So I'm curious to know what you do, Scott, and how you got doing what you're doing. But let's just start from today. You're in
Mm.
Japan right now. Tell me
Hmm.
about being in Japan and how you got there.
Sure. Well, it's a bit of a long story, but I'll try to keep it short. So I'm from Canada originally, and I would say about, going back to, I came here in 98. So going back to about 96, 97, I was going through I don't know, a transitional period in my life where I had to make some changes.
Mhm.
So as I went through this transition, a mentor of mine gave me a book called Awaken the Giant Within by Tony
Yeah.
Robbins, and I
Mhm.
read it cover to cover. And Tony said, "You got to set goals and have a vision for your life." And I thought, yeah, that's what I need. So I set out to do that. And within a week or two, I had created this massive vision board that I had up in my apartment. So I created this vision of this for this life that I like. There's like this dream life that I want to live.
Mhm.
And yeah, basically there's like three things. I made a list of goals and stuff like that. So there are three things on the goals list. One was to want to become an author, which was probably my dream since I was in junior high school.
Wow.
And the second thing was I wanted to travel the world, which was kind of a new one, but I'd be meeting people who had gone to like Indonesia and Vietnam, and they're telling me all these stories. And at the time I was living in, Victoria City in Canada, right? So I'd never really gone anywhere. And I mean, maybe here and there, but I mean, I never really took like a trip overseas to see another culture. So just doing that really excited me, like, and the more I thought about it, the more like I was like, it kind of scared me, but excited me at the same time. So
Yeah.
that was like, I knew I was onto something.
Yeah.
So the third thing, I think I just wanted to become a greater human being. And by that, I mean, like I was started to read a lot of these self-help books, personal development books and all that. And that kind of led me down eventually to where I was, yes, creating my own material. But just circling back a little bit to how I got to here, once I had decided that, okay, I'm going to go travel the world, that was kind of like the big vision. I'm going to go to Thailand and maybe, ride a few elephants or something. I don't know. I didn't have much of a plan. My plan was just I was going to go to the airport a year from that moment where I decided I was going to go traveling the world. I was going to give myself a year to prepare for it. Something amazing happens though when you decide to do something, right? And I realize this is like when you make a definitive decision that I'm going to do this thing no matter what. A few months later, my roommate had brought home the newspaper, and I had just opened it up to a random page, and I never read the newspaper, so I opened up to this random page, and there's this big advertisement there that says "Teach English in Japan, apply now," and that's what I did. I just sent in a resume, back when we had newspapers and resumes, and I
Right.
just sent a resume with a cover letter, and yeah, a month later they contacted me, and I was downtown Vancouver having a business lunch with a Japanese businessman who owned these like business he owned a bunch of schools in Japan, and they taught business English, so they ended up hiring me and flying me over with a few other people. And, so here's the thing is like, just going back a little bit, I'm jumping around the timeline a little bit, but when I had decided to go travel the world, I decided the date was going to be like March 26th or something like that. Right. Well, when the company had decided to bring us over to Japan, the date that they actually brought us over was like March 26th. So it was kind of like a weird coincidence. But again, when things started to, move forward, I was like, wow, there's some magic happening here, and I realized like, I kind of looked at it as it must have been a coincidence. Maybe I just got lucky, but um, I've had a lot of luck, so that might be a conversation for later. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I got here, and just loved it. Like I came over with a few other people that I didn't know. They just hired like three or four people and brought them over, and they all eventually went back. I stayed though. I knew like for me it was like a one-way ticket. And I wasn't like running away from anything. I just wanted to try something new. I was living in a new place, meeting new people. Every day was a new day, and I just love that, you know. So
That's so
um,
great. I don't want to give you to give away your age if you don't want to, but how old were you when you did this, leaving
Well,
Canada?
I'll be 55 this year. I was 27, 28 at the time, I think.
Okay.
So, and at the time, by the way, I mean, I already had a career that I was, I was an electrical engineer. So, I've been working at that for, 5 or 6 years, running jobs and stuff like that. But I knew that that wasn't my calling. Like that
Mhm.
wasn't my thing. But I was grateful for the fact that it got me as far as it did because, then I was ready when I was ready for the next thing. I didn't
Mhm.
have any fear of moving on. And, a lot of people like you went from an electrical engineer to teaching business English in Japan and eventually to like, becoming an author and an entrepreneur and that stuff. But, that was the journey. So,
That's so good. So what at 27, you're in Canada,
mm,
you're being an electrical engineer, did you just feel something more that had you look, or you said somebody gave you a book, the Tony Robbins
yeah,
book? Was that
yeah.
because you were restless, discontented, or what was that relationship?
I like those words, restless and discontented. I've always been that way in a little way. Like it was always looking for the next thing to move into. Now let's go back a few years actually prior to that. So I used to spend a lot of time drinking and in the bars and had a very wild nightlife, and I was balancing that between work and surprisingly I never missed a day's work, but the alcohol became a problem. So when I tried to stop it, I couldn't. And, went into recovery for it, went into AA and just like, well, that was just amazing, because it took me a long time to get my head straight. And I think that's what happened is like, and my mentor, by the way, was like really like my sponsor in AA.
Mhm.
And I remember sitting down for coffee with this guy one day and I asked him why are you spending time with me? You could be out like, it was like a Saturday afternoon. And it's like you could be out with your family and you're here with me. Right. And he's like, well, because I believe that if I can teach you to, get over this thing and become something greater than you've never believed you could be before, then, that could mean something. And I didn't really understand what he meant at the time. But I would say like a year later, it started to catch on. And it's like, once the fog clears, like then I started to get clarity, and then I started reading more of these books. And I've always been a big reader, but probably more like I read a lot of fiction. I used to write a lot when I was probably younger, which eventually, that when I picked it up again, it was just like jumping onto an old bicycle. But when I started reading this material, like by Tony Robbins and Brian Tracy and Jim Rohn and all these other great books, that I'd only ever heard of. I was like every time I did, like something, I felt like I was learning something new and I didn't have to go to school for it. I just had to go to the library, spend a few, well, either that or the bookstore, spend a few bucks and I had all the knowledge I needed. But every time I read one of these books, it was setting me on this new path, right? And I could just feel it. So the restlessness actually came from, I didn't want to continue doing what I was doing because I began to believe that there was something greater out there. And so when I realized one day, yeah, I want to go traveling the world, it was literally just like, I think it was just like, I don't know, it was like in a moment where I just realized this is what I'm going to do. And here's another thing. Yes, I found the job in Japan a few months after that, but even before that, I started meeting people that had already done these things and they were telling me these stories. And again, chop it up to coincidence. But again, when you start looking for something, you tend to see it everywhere. There's a term we have for that. I can't remember what it is, but if you buy a red car, you start seeing red cars everywhere, right? Well,
The
I started to see.
reticular
Yeah, yeah.
activation
Yes,
system.
that is it.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And I had that on full blast, right? So, and interesting too, because I was living with some roommates at the time and they were coming home and like from work or from the bars or whatever late at night. And I'd be on the floor with I went to the library that day and I came home with these books on how to speak Thai and Vietnamese and I was just like, I think what I had done when I look back at it now I had built the future before I actually got there, right? And part of it was like I had to, whether it was intentional or not, I just made it so real that there was no going back, right? And I even had like friends where I was like, "Oh, you're not really going anywhere. You're not gonna," And I think maybe part of them, it's not that they didn't want me to go, or maybe they didn't actually. Maybe they wanted me to stay because they didn't want me to move to the other side of the world and never see me again. But I was like, "No, I'm really going." But and I did. And the interesting thing is like even leading right up to the very day when I first got on that plane. I got into the airport that day, and of all things to forget on my kitchen counter, it was the passport.
No.
Yeah. So back in those days, we didn't have cell phones. I couldn't just call up my, my roommates and say, hey, would you mind bringing my passport to the airport because we're boarding in half an hour? One of my roommates had noticed that he had come home early from work that day, noticed the passport was on the counter. He knew I was getting on the plane, and he just got to the airport literally 10
Wow.
minutes before. So things like that always happen. But I mean, anyway, so it's been a great journey. I mean, it's certainly not over yet, but that's the thing with me too, is like, I get to a certain point where I like being comfortable, but then there's also this restlessness that's always going on inside me, where it's like, like what's the next stage? What's the next level? What's the next challenge? And I'm always looking for that, I think. And I don't know if it's just built into my psyche, but I think part of it goes back to when I was going through, addiction recovery. Like I didn't want to go back to that once I felt like I had gotten away from it.
Mm.
I would have done anything not to go back to it. So I'm always looking for something to like that creativity part of me just exploded. And so I need to stay really busy working on a lot of other stuff, just because the only other option for me is to keep moving forward. So
Right.
one of my favorite sayings to people is like, whenever I finish talking to them, I'm saying like, okay, well, have a great day and keep pushing forward, because that's just my motto for everything. So,
So I have a question about that. And if
mm,
if you don't feel comfortable answering this, please don't feel you need to. But when I think about addiction recovery
mm,
and whatever it is that has a person get into that
mm,
that activity, and you overcome that, do you think
mm,
the pushing forward and always continuing to strive just replaces the addiction to alcohol or something else? It's like
mm.
addiction now to a new thing.
I think there is something to that. I mean, like any addict, I mean, I was addicted to a lot of other things as well. So there's certainly that part of me that will always be there.
Mhm.
And so I'm not trying to escape from it. But then again, I know like if I don't stay busy creating other things, I'm going to, there is the possibility that I could fall back into that. And what I used to create a lot of before was self-sabotage, right? Like I would used to just self-sabotaging relationships, my finances. And this went on for many, many years. Even after recovery, it was still like a thing that was recurring because with addicts, whether it's the alcohol, drugs, sex, you name it, we're always drawn back into that a dark circle. It reminds me of this one of my favorite movies back from the 80s is like The Empire Strikes Back. And I remember as a kid, like, watching Yoda, that was like the character that everyone just fell in love with. And I remember one of the lines from Yoda is like, he's like, once you start down the dark side, forever will it dominate your destiny. And I kind of look like addiction's the same thing. Like, it's always there if you want it, like you can always go back to it. But the other thing that keeps me away from it is well, actually no, I would say like not keeps me away from it, but it keeps it real for me. Is I still join meetings online and stuff like that. So you've really got to stay connected to the group as well, because I'm one of these and I can't speak for other people, but I need a lot of support still, and I tend to isolate.
Mm.
So when I'm around people and I have a support team, or even in a company, if I'm working for a team, like that makes me feel really good. I get a lot of energy from that.
Mm,
So
mm.
that
So
connectedness.
yeah, I have a couple of, I'm taking notes as we're talking. I have a couple of
Yeah.
places that I want to go. I want to talk about community at some point, which you've just now started talking about. The people you surround yourself with, we know from Jim Rohn, you become the people you hang around with,
Mm, mm.
So in that space, let's talk about community. But also you just mentioned when I'm working for a company. Tell me more about that. What are you doing in a corporate way besides writing
Yeah.
books?
Yeah. So let's see now. I left my corporate job back in 2019. So I was working for a company for about, yeah, I guess about 20 years.
Mm,
Building teams, running teams. Like the company would send us out to some of these bigger companies, like Panasonic and Toyota and Mitsubishi. And we go there and we would teach their business executives like who they were taking trips overseas to do business, right? And sometimes they were living over there, so we would teach them all the cultural, ins and outs and what to do, what not to do,
Mm,
and some of it was like teaching them the language as well. But
mm,
an interesting part of that job was that I got connected with a lot of people. Like every day, I was working with a lot of people and surrounded by a lot of people, which I always thought of myself as an introvert, but actually, that's probably only when I've had enough of like, if I've spent like 70% of my time around a bunch of people, I do need that certain space to kind of pull away. Maybe everybody's like that. I don't know. But I just love that that connection I have with, I guess with teams, especially because I love belonging to a team,
mhm.
working with a team, and then seeing what the team can do together. Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, back when I was in corporate, and then, I work with a coaching company as well, and we have like again, like we're with a team, and then with my publishing company, and I don't publish other people's books either. I just publish
Mhm.
like I do have enough of my own books to publish those. So I kind of have like there's me, and then I have my own small team with my publishing company as well. So, I think the one thing I learned though is that you can't make it on your own. So although I've tried many times, I realized like, yeah, I actually need people to succeed. I guess we all do, right? So.
I think so. I think so. That's a really profound insight for
Mm,
people who haven't had the chance to maybe break through like you have in your thinking and in your mindset.
mm,
They might think the only way I can do this is by myself because nobody else can help me. That's sort of an intro. How would I say that? I hate to say use this term, but narcissistic
mm,
behavior says I will do it myself and only I can do it. And in
mm,
that behavior, I think that's talking about addiction. That can be addicting too. Nobody
mm-hmm,
else
mm-hmm,
is good enough for me or whatever it might be. And I love that you said you surround yourself now with your team, your publishing company team. And you alluded to it earlier about community. I called it community. You didn't say it like that,
mm,
but community to me is your people
mm-hmm,
and the term community that I like to refer to is the one that Peter Block, who's an author. I don't know if you've ever heard of Peter Block,
mm-hmm.
but he wrote,
I don't know.
okay, well, you might really enjoy his writing, but
Mm,
he wrote a book that I especially like called Community. And the
mm,
subtitle is The Structure of Belonging. And he says that community is ownership, basically, ownership of something. And if I own my like in your case, I own my publishing company, I own my activities. That's
mm,
one way to think of community, but the other is a longing to be. I can
mm,
just be with my people, in the
mm,
space where I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to, do everything correctly. I can just be me.
mm,
To me, that's the distinction that I'm learning still, that I become so much better. And I think you just kind of alluded to that too, when I have my people around me,
mm. Yeah.
supporting me.
Yeah. Quick, interesting story though, but like back in 2019 when I decided to leave my corporate job, I just thought it was time. I'd done it long enough and I was ready to, book business was starting to go well. So I thought, why not just give this a chance and just jumped right into it really. Big learning curves there, I'll tell you. Things I learned
What's
about
the it? What's the it you jumped into?
I
Entrepreneurial?
jumped right into as a full-time author,
Author.
entrepreneur.
Okay. Yeah.
And I
Yeah. Yeah.
thought, but so I went from and then COVID happened in 2020. We all know what
Sure.
happened with that.
Yeah.
So we all have our own stories around that. But I went from working with a team to suddenly what I thought was, like living the dream is like working from home. I could just wake up in the morning, turn on my Zoom, and I was, like my whole world was there. And for me, it was like it was a nice break, I think, away from the job and everything. But what I realized, like probably a year into it, and then COVID hit and everything, and well, we all became a little bit isolated, and wow, that was really hard. Even before COVID, though, because I started missing the team that I used to work with, even though I
Mhm.
wanted to quit my job and
Mhm.
everything like that and be away from my desk. I actually kind of went, I almost had a like a nervous breakdown just
Mhm.
like within the first year. Even though I was doing a lot of coaching online and stuff like that, it's not the same thing, right? When you're used to going, leaving your home, going into a workplace, seeing the people you work with, putting in your day and coming home. And when I was doing all that too, like I mean, even for years, I was still building my book business early in the morning, late at night, and I was really busy like all day long. But I mean, I really like that too.
Mhm.
So yeah, it just showed me like, wow, I need to be surrounded by people, not just virtually, but I need to, and I think we all, maybe, I don't know if we all do, but I mean, I had to connect with people. So I remember one day, just after COVID had kicked in, I went back to that company. I didn't go back asking for my job to back, but I mean, I went in just to see how everybody was doing, and there was someone else sitting in my manager's
Yeah.
chair or something like that. And it was a big, that was a, I left that place that day just thinking like, I really messed up. I screwed up. I can't go back. And um, anyway, I guess my point to the story though was like, that was hard. Like it
Yeah.
was like it was a hard lesson. And it turns out though, like after I went through about 6 months of some emotional pain of getting over that, like that feeling of regret where you have
Mhm.
something like you really feel like you made a mistake that you can't go back from. And I held on to that for about 6 to 9 months, I think, until I finally got over it coming into 20, like out of COVID 2021, wrote a new book. I hadn't published anything in 2020. And, I did have kind of like not a nervous breakdown, but it was, I certainly had like an anxiety attack, and I had those a few times during the year. And I know like everybody went through their own thing, I think. Just coming out of 2021 though, I'd made a decision that okay, can't go back. Decisions were made, can't go back and change things. Only thing we can do is keep pushing forward. Had a new idea for a book, which was do the hard things first, and I just wrote it in about 3 months, put it out there. And it's probably one thing that I think saved me really. Yeah, because the book actually kind of like it took off without me really planning for a success. I mean, I don't know if you can actually plan for that, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it just kind of took off and publishers picked it up and stuff like that. I thought, okay, I'm back in the game again. So,
Nice. That's such a great, you've done a great job of describing, I think, what many of us did experience during COVID, and
mm,
having to, in a way, start over, but in a way move forward, as you said, because going back, if you take the new you back to the old space, they don't
mm,
recognize you anymore because there's a new you
mm,
there. And so some
mm,
of that, if we try to fit ourselves into old molds, then we're discounting all the experiences we've had, which may have been hard, but that, like you said, pushes us forward. And
yeah.
so being that example for others, you said calling earlier, you were talking about a calling. Sometimes I don't want to do that. I don't want to be
Mm,
this. I don't want to be the
mm,
one.
mm,
And yet, if we deny what, you mentioned what you felt was compelling you forward, it's a lot more difficult, I think.
yeah. Yeah, there were I mean, several situations where, and I think maybe a lot of people have been through this, where change was necessary, but it's the one thing that we resist.
Yeah.
So I'm fine to just kind of stay in my space and live in the same place forever. And we recently moved actually from I moved out of my apartment into a new house, and it was really hard for me to move out of the apartment. And after we left, like it was just this little apartment that I was living in after I left to, got divorced, moved into an apartment, and I was near my kids and stuff like that. And then leaving this apartment, moving into a new house, it was a big jump for some reason, but it was like giving up that space of comfort and moving into something new. And my
Mhm.
partner's like, do you want to go, like, it was like moving day, right? And the moving guys
Yeah.
were coming. And she's
Yeah.
like, well, if you want, we can just cancel the whole thing. You can move back to the apartment. The stuff we had moved everything into the moving truck, and they were moving it over to the
Yeah.
house. She goes, they're not there yet. And she was serious. She's like, we could actually cancel the whole thing. The thing is, I almost did. Like I
Really.
was that close because like, we hold on to the past a lot, and we hold on to things that are familiar,
Hmm.
and it feels good. I mean, it's just like there's kind of like a safety net there. But
Hmm.
and this was only recently, but looking back at it now, it's like if I moved back to the old apartment, I would have been moving back to the old me, and
Right.
the old me actually wanted to become something, move into a new place, have a new beginning, and all that, right?
Yeah.
So, I think change is necessary, but it's not easy. I mean, that's just, and same with whenever I like left the old job, like I wanted to go back to that old job a year later, and
Hmm.
it's like,
Hmm.
and if they had said to me, yeah, we'll take you back today, I think I might have done it,
Hmm.
which maybe it's a good thing they didn't. But um, but
I
that's
think,
just it.
but
They
you're
do.
talking, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, yeah, it was just maybe that was just destiny. It's like the only thing to do is just to keep moving forward. And like you're going to go through that little bit of like that transition where it's going to be a little bit painful, a little bit emotional, but on the other side of that is everything else. So.
And I love that you've identified that even with your own personal reservations, because this podcast is called Circle Up and Get Real. It's about
Mhm.
being real, being authentic, sharing that authentically, because others might look at someone like you who's a successful author and say, I can't do this because I'm not as good as Scott. I didn't do it the way Scott did it, because our persona might not always present as our real authentic self. And I think
Mm.
that's what social media has done to us sometimes.
Mhm. Mhm.
We think all the shininess is what is true, and it often isn't.
Mm.
And so when you can say things like, I think I would have gone back. I think I would have.
Mhm.
Something in you, you called it destiny, didn't allow you to go back, even though it would have been
Mm.
more comfortable to do that. And I
Mm.
wonder if, as you mentioned, we have to go through discomfort to grow, but I wonder if we call it comfort and it's really familiarity. It's not
Mm.
comfortable anymore at
Mhm.
all to go
Mhm.
back. And we call
Yeah.
it comfort, but I just think it's familiar. It's not
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah, it is exactly. Yeah, it's that familiarity. It feels good to just to sit there and not really not moving forward, not you're just I don't know, I was existing in the moment, but I remember my partner saying, "But you wanted to move to the new house. Remember you talked about it for months." And she's right. Like I even forgot about all that. It's like,
Mm,
"Oh yeah, like I wanted to move, and I'm just using that as an example. You can use that as like if you're looking to change your job or change a relationship, and all these things are hard to move out of and into new territory,
right.
but I guess that's when we move out of the like the comfort zone into the discomfort, and that's only going to last a little while. You're going to be, you're going to get used to your new surroundings. You're going to get
Mhm.
used to your job, and then if you stay in it long enough, hopefully you're going to want to move on to something else eventually. That may not be so true with relationships. I mean, if relationships are working and they're really great, let's keep building those, but there's always things in our lives that we can continue to build on, and we've got to keep moving forward with things, so
Right, right. Well, yeah, that nature moves forward. And if we're trying
yeah.
to resist the moving forward, we're resisting nature, really.
Mm.
And what we resist tends to persist. We've learned that, you and I both, from the things you've said you've read, I've read, we've studied. Um, so you talked a little bit about coincidence at the beginning, and you said things just sort of happened. Let's
Mm.
talk about coincidence for a second.
Mm.
That word is so funny because people
Mm.
don't use it correctly, I don't think. Coincidence just means two things that are happening at the same time. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean, oh my gosh, wasn't that crazy that that happened? If things are really, like you've described, working in an energetic flow, it's supposed to
Mm.
be that way. Your reticular
Mhm.
activation system wakes you up and goes, yep, there's another sign. Yep, there's another one. And we call it coincidence, but as your vision board, you did your vision board and you put it out there into the universe that this is what I want to do. And you got pulled forward. So
Mhm.
really, coincidence isn't really crazy once you get onto
Mm.
the path you're on, would you say?
Mm. Not at all. So I think someone had called it the lucky bus, I remember. And I think it was from a book called The Third Door that I was reading a while back. And
Okay.
the author had mentioned something called the lucky bus, but he said, like, the lucky bus comes around, he says. And in order for you to get onto the lucky bus, you've got to have your ticket. In other words, what he was
Mhm.
saying is, you've got to already have prepared for that luck to happen. Like, luck to me, like, that's something you prepare for, right? So, yeah, I work with a lot of authors, by the way. And, you know, they are often like coming into it, kind of scared, writing their first book or their second book sometimes, and there's a lot of resistance and fear to putting something out there, and so sometimes, I mean, and I've been doing this for like 10 years or so, right? So sometimes they'll look at me or another author maybe, and they'll be like, oh, but like if I use Stephen King as an example, right? Which is probably not a great example, but they're like, oh, but that's Stephen King, and he can do anything. And I'm like, well, that may be true, but the thing that I look at is like, why is he Stephen? Like, how did he get to that level? Probably because he just showed up every day and put in the work, right? So, I mean, he got really lucky with his career and success. And I've never talked to Stephen King, so I can't really say like what he would say to this, but he probably got really lucky because he just worked really hard at his craft and got really good at it, and he just didn't quit.
Mhm.
Um, well, maybe there's a one time when he threw Carrie into the garbage and his wife pulled it out. But I mean, he did get back on the
Right.
horse, you know. So yeah.
Right.
But I mean, like I have them kind of like they'll point to me and go, well, you've got all this success and stuff like that. And I never like said that. It's just like they kind of look at you as somebody who's kind of like untouchable. But it's like, look, 10, 15 years ago, I just sat down with a pen and an idea. That's all I had and a piece of paper. And I just started mapping out my books after procrastinating on with them like for 3 or 4 years. I finally got around to doing it. And it's like, if you just do this one thing and you stick with it, you might end up getting lucky too. Right. So again,
Mm,
we have to follow through with our plans,
yeah.
and I was just always like that, where it's like, again, it comes back to that definitive decision where it's like when I realized there's something I really wanted, I was just like all in on it. And maybe like, I mean, I'm just using writing as an example. It can be music, it can be art, it can be anything. Like if you feel like this is your calling, even if there's some self-doubt there, that's okay. But I mean, if you just give yourself to this thing
Mm,
and you commit 100%, your overnight success, which could take 5, 10, or 20 years, eventually might happen. Right.
right.
But that's the thing is like, you do have to, we hear about the overnight success and, you hear about people saying, yeah, but it took me 20 years to get lucky. I got my
Yeah.
lucky break. But then again, the lucky break only came like that's an opportunity that you probably created, whether
Mm,
you're aware of it or not. You put that energy out into the world, and so I think we kind of miss that sometimes. It's
yeah.
like when opportunity comes around, we're like, oh wow, I was in the right place at the right time. It's like, well, you probably have been preparing for this for like 10 years. And, it's just the universe finally just said, like, let's give them the chance finally and just put that in your way. So,
I love
yeah.
it. So let's talk about your books. You've written many books. You want to talk about which ones? You can talk us about all of them, but tell me about
Mm.
that situation, how that started.
Well, it started off. So I was actually, I love fiction, and actually started off when I got back into writing, which was probably back in, I would say, maybe just going back 15 years, I think. I started publishing. So basically, let's just go back a little ways. I started writing again about 15 years ago. I knew this was the next step. Like I just, I've been teaching for a long time, working in the company, but I knew like and here's like, I could feel myself getting restless again. I'm like, okay, there's that feeling again. What is it that I'm not working on that I should be? And I knew what it was, and I was putting it off because I was scared of sitting down again and writing after not doing it for so many years. I talked about it all the time, and that's the thing. I told my friends about it. I told my business partners about it, and they're like, okay, like here he is again talking about this book that we're never going to see. And one of my friends actually just said that to me one day. They're like, you've been talking about this like this writing thing you're going to do for like 2 or 3 years. Like when are you going to make it happen? And that just kind of made me a bit angry. So I just sat down one day, angry at myself.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just sat down one day and I just thought, you know what? I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to sit down with my pen and paper and just start, mind mapping out some ideas. And that's what I did. And I actually wrote like 2 or 3 fiction novels, which I have not published yet, because what happened is that I got to a point where it was like a crossroads where I loved the nonfiction stuff, got me to where I am because that really got my head straight. And I just loved the whole like learning about mindset and yeah, Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins and Mel Robbins and all those people that were in the space, like I was just learning so much from that. So it's like, okay, I can do the fiction or the nonfiction, but I can't do both. And
Mm,
I just decided, I think it's just like in one day, I just said, you know what? I had an idea for a nonfiction book that I wanted to write. I just sat down and I penned it out, and then I spent 3 years writing it. And it probably
wow.
took me that long and by the time I was done, I had like 200, 300,000 words. I don't remember, but actually my book turned into like three eventually. And what happened is that I started to, okay, it was like every step was interesting because it was like, and this is before self-publishing, right? So I wasn't planning on self-publishing it. I was gonna pitch it to like obviously publishing companies. I had their addresses and I knew who I was gonna contact because there was books out there you can buy for that, right? So
Right.
I was doing all this reading up on it, but and I did pitch it to a few and got a few rejection letters, which I would have expected. And then Amazon launched their self-publishing platform, and I thought that was back in 2012, maybe 2013.
Mm,
But I thought, okay, well, I've got these books ready. I found an editor online. I found a cover designer on Fiverr, which is back in the day, everything was $5. So I
Right.
had my $5 cover ready, and
Yeah.
you know, but I mean, and looking back now, like those books that I had originally published, I've taken them down since then, republished, like rebranded everything, because I'm always into like making things better, right?
Mhm.
But the thing is like, I mean, maybe they weren't that great. That maybe the books weren't that great, but that's okay because I had to, if I'd waited for perfection, I never would have published anything. And
Right.
which is what I teach a lot of people. Like, don't wait. Just like, it's never going to be perfect. You got to put it out there and, just make it better as you go. So anyway, uh, it was just one of those things where I love the publishing process, like learning about it and putting out books. I was like, wow, so I could literally like write my own book in a month or 2 or 3 months. And I just kept learning more, like getting better at it, getting faster at it, and putting out more books. And I think I was around, it was like book number 4 or 5. I think it was actually the one behind me, Relaunch Your Life, was like book number 4. Uh, I was just come up with these ideas for books. Like, I mean, they were just there. I don't know. And then I had an image for the cover, and then I put it together, and it actually kind of like people liked it. It took off. It became a bestseller on Amazon, which back then it was kind of a big deal. Nowadays, that doesn't really matter to me. What matters is really is like, how do people feel about reading this book? Is it
Right.
changing lives?
Right.
And yeah, it ended up getting picked up by a few international publishers. They published it in India, Korea, a few other countries. And I was like, wow, I'm onto something here. And I felt momentum, right? So I like immediately got to work on the next book, put it out there. That did really well. And then I went from making, $20 a month on Amazon to, I think I was making more than my actual paycheck from my other job. So I was just taking that money and putting it back into my book business, right? Where I could create more stuff really. So
Mhm.
and it just became the fuel to the fire. I think I just kept and yeah, I mean there are legs in the creative process where it's like sometimes you feel like you're getting a little bit burned out, but that's when you realize like when that happens, um there's something more I've got to learn. Like I have to take it to the next level. And then I started coaching people around the publishing process and all that. And, working with other authors like that just, that actually helped me to become a better writer too. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, I think probably just leading up to COVID, kind of had a lag in 2020. I actually, so I mentioned after I quit my job, probably 2020, I think I unpublished more books than I published. I don't think I published any, and
Wow.
bad year. But when I published Do the Hard Things First, again, I just get these ideas wherever they come from, and if I mean maybe I'm tapping into something in the universe that just says we got to give this guy an idea because he's kind of like he's failing here. We got to help him out. So I came up with that idea for this book, put it out there, and a few years, yeah, coming up on the third anniversary for that book, and yeah, it's been picked up by about 16 publishers. So what I found interesting is like, I started out publishing on Amazon. I still publish on Amazon. We have our own site set up on Shopify now where people can go to, down and get the books directly. But I ended up getting all these like collaborating with all these other publishing companies outside of the US, in Germany, Thailand, Vietnam, Korea, Japan. Now we have a publisher here who's done 3 books. And now I could say like I got really lucky, but the fact is, I mean, I just happened to create the kind of books that they were looking for. And what happened is like when one publisher picks up a book, and then a second one and a third one, and a lot of them started picking up Do the Hard Things First. And when that happened, when the publisher started seeing like when they start to see your book everywhere, everybody wants a piece of the action, right? And I mean, I'm not like an expert marketer. I wasn't out there pitching it or anything like that. People are just catching wind of it and picking it up. So I feel really grateful for that too. Is like, yeah, I feel really lucky, grateful, and at the same time, I feel like maybe I didn't have any control over any of that at all. So
Maybe you got out of the way. You got
yeah,
yourself out of the
and
way
I
and
probably
allowed.
got out of the way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a good way to put it, I think. Yeah.
So
So
what are you looking for now, Scott? Are you looking to help other people start writing, or are you looking to sell more books? What is it that if people wanted more information from you, what would they be getting, and and where would they find you? Those two questions.
yeah, I mean, they can find me at scottallanbooks.com if they want to go there and just check out the Shopify store. I'm still building it out. There's still like it's an ongoing project, but I mean, everything's on there. Of course, they can go to Amazon and they can go to Google and just plug in Scott Allan interviews, and I think I've done 70 or 80 of them since March. Just gonna
Wait.
the
Since
reason
March?
Yeah, I've done a lot. Yeah, there's been quite a
Wow.
few. Yeah. Now, the reason that I love doing interviews, actually, let me just go back a little bit. When I started getting some traction with my books, way back when, I had podcasters reach out to me and they're like, "We want to interview you for the show," and I'd never done interviews before. I remember, and I was just like, "Wow, like I'm going to be on radio," and I remember like they would send me their questions ahead of time, and I would write down all my answers and I try to remember, like memorize everything, and they were going to be talking about my book, and I'm like, oh, well, I don't remember what I wrote in my book. What if they ask me a question? And I was like, what if they ask me a question I don't know? And
Yeah.
I was like having, these little anxiety fits, right? So I hated doing interviews. Not hated them. I actually liked them. And I always showed up for them. Like if I got invited to do an interview, even if I didn't want to go do it, I'd be like, no, I've got to do it. Because if I don't do it, you have to look at it like this, like what's the cost of not doing something,
Mhm.
right? So that's the thing. Like when I feel resistance towards something like let's say like you don't really want to do that. I mean, you could be just relaxing on the beach somewhere. Why go do that thing? And just like, yeah, but what's the cost of not doing it?
Mhm.
So I would always take the invitation and show up and do it, right? But yeah, this year I realized like I'm not out here to, like yeah, sell the books or pitch the books. I'm not doing a book tour, but I want people to realize like, wow, there's a real person behind all the content that I've created, first of all. And also I want to get onto bigger stages in the future and actually teach people from the stage.
Mhm.
And that's it, because I love teaching. I love connecting with people. And I think what a great way to do that than to be, like hosting like live stage events. That's the big dream now, right? So that's kind of something I'm pushing for. So the reason I'm doing all the interviews is really just to build a skill set to get better at speaking. I used to be really nervous just on the microphone. As soon as they said record, I'd like freeze up and I could they'd have to like be almost giving me the answers, right? So but after I did like 5 or 10 of them, I was like yeah, it was great. So now I just love connecting with people, telling my story, talking about the things that are going to be helping people. I hope when they listen to you know the conversations that I have, and I've met so many great people like doing this as well. So anyway, that's kind of like I think my purpose behind everything. And yeah, sure. I mean, people want to read the books. That's great. We've got courses we're building in as well. So I'm just looking to, and I got the books in multiple languages. So depending on where you're living, maybe you can pick it up in your local bookstore. But that's only because like to me it's not like sure, we sell 1 million books, that's great, but that's not the it's not to make a bunch of money. It's like if I can help as many people as possible to my whole thing's about becoming the architect of your life, right?
Mhm.
And I want to teach people how to do that, because I feel like when I look back now, um I think that's what I was trying to do. And so what I'm still trying to do, like becoming the master of your own domain, your own lifestyle, like building the life that you want. And I know that sounds kind of like a little bit what woo woo maybe really, but I mean, if you're not building your own life, then what are you building, right? I mean, so I'm just really into teaching people how to do that, and I'm still learning too. Like, I mean, I watch interviews every day. One of my favorite podcast episodes, like the Diary of a CEO, and
Mhm.
I met Tom Bilyeu in a mastermind. Like, I just like love like following those people and learning so much from them. Of course, Tony Robbins and everybody. So, you know.
We have a lot we could talk about with just what you said at the very end, which is becoming the architect of your own life. Um, that's what it means to me to be real. And
Mm,
Diary of a CEO is one of my favorite podcasts too. So there's a lot of connection there. And
mm,
there are no, again, going back to what we said earlier, there are no coincidences. It's just things that keep showing up that show us how lucky we are. So I
mm-hmm.
think I'm going to title this episode Getting Real About Getting Lucky, because
I
that's
like it.
really what you have talked about today.
Yeah.
So I so appreciate the conversation, Scott. I appreciate you being up with me at whatever time of the night it is for you where you are in Japan. And it's a pleasure to help support your work and to give you this platform to talk about what you're up to, because I think the world just needs more of this,
Mm.
more options to help become the architect of their own lives.
Well, I like it. Yeah. We can do a part two someday. So
Yeah, I love that. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Scott. And everybody else, if you're interested in learning more about Scott, he's given us a couple of places to find him. Scott Allan Books. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. And look him up, Google him. There are lots of ways that you can see more of Scott. So thank you, Scott. And as
Thank you.
always, everybody, just go get real, because what the world is missing is you, real. And I'll look forward to talking with you again. Thanks, everybody.